At Ethos, we say thank you to the administration at the Elkhart Community Schools for their support of their teachers as they complete science inquiry training. Join us as we celebrate science at the Elkhart Community Schools. And we're rolling.
Yes. Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back.
Yes.
We got a couple good questions for us to ponder on.
That's right. So I'll go ahead and jump right into the first question. John, it says, if students are not able to answer their questions because it is not aligning with their standards, will this discourage them, and how can we best support?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's kind of the old school thing where I'm the teacher, I'm the expert, I know everything in the world, and at least more than my kids. I'm always going to be the guru in the classroom. And it's okay for kids to have questions we just don't answer. That could be kind of scary, but it's like it's their job. Like we had a kid, you mentioned it earlier about a kid who they asked what was at the center of the universe. Well, that's a great question. You can look it up and talk about the theories, but I always push that back on the kids. And this is a great time to say, hey, we think we have ideas what the center, astronomers are working on it, but your generation, you've got to help us out here. We got to figure this one out. It's a challenge for them.
And I think that's a great way to give them the ownership too. Like it's their responsibility to determine that answer. And for them, they would be like, yes, this is exciting.
Yeah, it could be part of their future now, and there are ways teachers can take advantage of this in the classroom too, right?
Yes. One thing that comes to my mind to kind of help with all the questions is to make that wonder wall. That's a great area to park those questions that a student asks, and it's not necessarily connected to our standards or your kit or your unit, but we want to validate the students and let them know we're hearing their question. Put it up there. And from my experience, the majority of my students, once that question went on the wonder wall, they actually were fine. And they actually, for me, never really talked about it during class. They may have asked me during recess or other times, but they never took that instruction time to focus on that question that wasn't necessarily connected to our curriculum.
Yeah, the wonder wall, that's an awesome idea. And you're right, recess too. I'm sorry, but those conversations as a teacher, it gives us really a time to really get to know our kids. Yes. Is that you can take that science conversation out on the playground.
And that's what I loved. I loved that I loved it when students wanted to talk about science during recess because I love science. So I was like, yes, let's do this. And I also really found that as a good teaching moment too. To really show the students that the classroom is just not in our physical room, but it's anywhere.
Right.
And another thing I want to mention about the wonder wall, something that I then started to adapt was I would include it within my science notebook. So my students had a wonder section of their notebook. So then when they would have questions, they would go ahead and put it in the notebook to kind of keep it as a document of their thinking too, of their learning.
No, it's really smart. So that line of learning, and then have a part in their notebook where they're keeping track of all these questions.
And that also became a good resource for when they finished work early in class, they could go to the notebook and do some research on one of their I wonder questions.
It makes me think because you run into some really brilliant minds in science out there, and a lot of those individuals will talk about something that happened, some question they had. What are auroras? How does this work? What are magnets? What is this thing going on? And it stays with them their entire life. And as teachers, we just don't know. And that it could be that some of those questions leads into a career path for our kids, much later in life. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, so I think it definitely is okay to allow students to ask those questions, and us as teachers not to feel bad if we're not able to answer every question that students have. I don't think there's enough time in the world. If all we did was just answer kids' questions from the beginning of the day to the end, I don't think we still would have enough time.
No, I know. It'd be a lot of fun.
It would.
You'd hope they get into those. I know I had friends that we actually talked about this crazy stuff, and it became what we did on the weekends and stuff. And how do you make that happen as a teachers? We're okay to not have to answer every question. I would say even sometimes we shut the door sometimes too quick with students by giving them a pat answer. So, yep, we can check it on and move on. Sometimes I think saying we don't know or we'd like to know, go for it, is much more powerful.
That's right. I agree. And then, John, our second question for today
Okay.
connects to questions. And it says, is there value in both open and closed questions?
Oh, definitely not.
No.
What do you think?
I think there is. We really, with the inquiry process, you want to encourage those students to have those open-ended questions for their investigation, but I think closed questions are just as important.
Oh, definitely. And, we've only got so much time, like we're saying, is some of these, we can just say, this is what it is, let's move on. You know what I mean? And as a teacher, I think it's good to be strategic in trying to anticipate some of these questions that are going to come and think, where are you going to spend your time? I think that comes with experience, and you kind of realize here are good hunker down areas and these are not. Let's move on and get into the investigation and let the kids kind of check those off. So definitely need a balance.
And and it's also a great way to really help your scaffold or differentiation in the classroom. Some of our students may just be able to start off with those closed questions, and being able to just ask the question, that's going to be a success for some of our students. So I think we really need to encourage it and say it's okay if they ask them. Now, again, when you're thinking about the inquiry, doing an investigation, those closed questions, you're not going to go very far, or it could be very frustrating. So those we want open, but I still would encourage my students to ask those closed questions too. I think they both are important.
That's a really good point, because we're starting off with students on anything we're getting into that's new. We're going through Bloom's taxonomy. We're starting very low. All right, let's go for some really, yes, no, some simple recall, and let's move that way. So get all the kids involved, get everybody kind of discussing. My problem has always been with those, you have the crickets chirping,
Yeah.
What's the answer to this? And if you give them a closed question, all right, we're done. Whereas with open questions, the dialogue never stops. You can keep it going, which is kind of fun.
And what's really cool is you can start to teach your students to go from the closed to the open. So allow the students to start with that closed question, but then teach them how to turn the question, how to turn it to open. And I think that's another great way to help the students too.
You're talking about, that's a skill. And as a teacher, that's something we need to work on, is whenever we see closed questions, I think it's important for us to build that skill set ourselves. Like, how do I turn this closed question into an open question? Mm-hmm. And that's the point where I like different techniques, like answering a question with a question. Mm-hmm. Or
my students nuts.
I had students who wanted that validation. This week I had a student, she came up to me and she wanted that validation. Is this right? And my answer was, what do you think? What do you think? Oh, it sounds okay, good, awesome. You're figuring this out, good. But she had to validate herself, that I'm okay. I don't, I can do this and I can figure this out on my own.
Yeah, I think I always loved questioning students with questions. Some of mine would get so frustrated. They'd be like, Mr. Hunnings. I'm like, I'm just asking a question.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Yeah, so those are two great questions of really focusing on that skill of questioning with the inquiry process. So enjoyed it.
Yes, and thank you for those who are putting out the questions for us. Really appreciate it.
Yes, and we'll see you guys next time.